Coming to you from the last video store in the universe, it's Binge Movies 150. I'm Jason. This is the show that ranks and eliminates movies to determine which ones are most worthy of preservation for all time, even beyond the end times. In this episode, we rank the films of John Woo. My guest today comes highly recommended from very many people on film Twitter, which could go either way because film Twitter sometimes is
a cesspool.
Cesspool. So, and that kind of you kind of get to my point here. You get to my point, my dear guest. You are Carlo from the movie Loot.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, I am.
Now, if it's movie Loot, are you stealing from these movies?
The premise of the show is that I'm sharing that loot with everybody.
Okay. So but how do you come in possession of the loot?
Well, that might lead me to what is the premise of the show, and I run two types of episodes. One of them I start every month with a set of criteria of what I'm going to watch. Let's say I say this month I'm going to watch a film from Akira Kurosawa, or I'm going to watch a film from the 1920s, or a film with the word time in its title. And that's my loot. That's what I seek, or what I'm trying to find out that month, and then I'm sharing that loot with everybody when I'm talking about the films that I'm watching.
I understand.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that you're robbing these movies.
Yes, I am.
And if we're talking about John Woo and you're robbing things, then that means you're the hitman / bad guy with a heart of gold. And that means I'm the cop on the edge. I'm the guy that's about to lose control, trying to bring you down.
We're mirror images.
We are mirror images of each other, but in the end, we'll end up being brothers.
Definitely.
Either literally or metaphorically.
We're going to be loyal to each other, and we're going to be jumping to the side with DVDs on our hands, avoiding.
Yes. Well, we'll be jumping to the side whilst actually, it would probably be two smartphones and giving 5 stars on Letterboxd at the same time whilst jumping through the air.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Because if we're going to be brothers, we got to be film bros. If we're going to be bros, we got to be film bros. And film bros love Letterboxd. We love Letterboxd. Exactly. There we are. You get it. You get it.
Yeah, definitely.
There is a good chance, though, that you might have to kill me by the end of this episode. I'm going to be so mortally wounded that the only thing I can do for you to go on to have the life that you've always deserved, I have to die.
At least we're going to see a lot of doves flying beside you. So you're going to.
But maybe not as many as you would think. Here's the thing, Carlo. I've been spiritually dead for many years, so you're really just finishing a job.
You're a shell of your former self.
Fire me! I'm already fired! Fire me! I'm already fired!
Oh, I'm a shell of 3 former selves ago. I've had so many different versions of me, I don't even know who I am anymore. What year is this? Am I from the past? Am I from the present? Am I from the future? Did I record this episode before season 6, or is this season 7, or did I do this all the way back when Pat was still alive? I don't know, Carlo. I'm lost. I'm a man lost in time. Time no longer exists.
I'm really looking forward to this. I don't know.
Yeah, listen. When you are somebody who lives at the nexus of the multiverse, which is Akron, Ohio, in particular, in this little tiny video store where I spend most of my time. Everything's folding in and out and upon itself in ways you can barely understand. And so there's a good chance I don't even exist anymore. And I can't quite wrap my mind around it. You can't quite wrap your mind around it. But together, we're going to try to wrap our mind around John Woo. How's that sound?
Definitely. I'm anxious to get into this.
Now, before we get to John Woo, let me ask you one question. Metaphysical. Are you prepared? Are you ready?
I might have to kneel on this chair for a minute to get ready, but yeah, after that, I'm going to be ready.
Okay. It's more of a hypothetical, but Carlo, what if God was one of us? What if God's just a stranger on a bus?
Just a slob, like one of us.
A slob?
Yeah.
There's 2 slobs on this podcast right now. You and I don't mean to offend you, But we're just a couple of slobs, as all human beings are, and God's just another slob.
Yeah, I was talking about the mess I have in my room. So yeah, I'm a slob. I know.
I have it on good authority. God doesn't like to fold his laundry. That's all I'm going to say.
I like that.
Your laundry is full. That from what I can see, it's hung. It's hung up on. It's beautifully organized. I think you've got one leg up on God. That's all I'm going to say. All right, we've covered it all. We've covered all the things likely to offend people at the front. You're likely to offend people, I'm guessing, by how you're going to rate these John Woo movies. I don't want to know. I don't want to know anything about your opinion until we dive into it. Let's start with 1986's A Better Tomorrow, which currently has a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Just one last job for money. Lots of money. Money to burn. One brother's a cop with a lot of promise for a successful career. The other brother, a lieutenant in the mob. He's also looking forward to a successful career. But they have one thing in common. And they're on a collision course with each other. And how can either one survive to live a better tomorrow?
A Better Tomorrow, which literally translates to True Colors of a Hero, was directed by John Woo. It was written by John Woo, but partially inspired by the story of a discharged prisoner from 1967. Woo had some co-writers on this. Folks from Asia, you must forgive me. I'm doing my best here. Chan Hing Kai and Leung Suk Hwa. It was released August 2nd, 1986 on a budget of not available. It made $34.7 million in Hong Kong and $4.8 million in the U.S. It was the first successful film after a 20-year career John Woo had, working mostly in comedies and some dramas. This was the first blockbuster, if that's what you want to call it, first big hit film that he had in Hong Kong. And I think when we think about Woo, most of us don't think about him as having a really already an entire career outside of what he is most famous for, at least stateside, and that is his Hong Kong action films. And we're sort of reinventing the action movie. We'll get into that. But for his first big hit film here, my one sentence plot synopsis is: a reformed triad gangster gets caught between his kid brother and his blood brother while trying to stay out of trouble.
Two brothers on different sides of the law join forces with a disgraced gang member to take down the triad boss that betrayed them years ago.
Yeah, so our synopsis is going to get repeated kind of often because he's got a theme that he likes to put into every movie, especially from the era that we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
The most outstanding thing about this movie is that it essentially reinvented action cinema in Hong Kong. Hong Kong at that time had its own sort of standard for what action cinema was. And at the time, Hong Kong action really revolved around either classical kung fu or physical comedy that was mixed with action. And they didn't have much of a palate or much of a taste for gunplay in particular. And that's sort of a more, which totally makes sense. And it's much more of a Western, in particular, North American, especially USA sort of sensibility, because it's woven into the myth of westward expansion, the myth of the cowboy and all this sort of stuff. And so guns have been a part of the American myth that we've told ourselves forever and ever and ever. So we inherently as Westerners tend to think that they're cooler than places where they've been less available and less part of the culture. And places where the culture is much longer and they have their own myths that form how they think about themselves in the world. So for him to do this, to not just come out and go, okay, I've been making movies for 20 years and some have been so received, but now I'm going to make a movie and I'm going to make essentially perfect a genre and invent a genre at the same time, and perfect what's known as the heroic bloodshed genre by taking it in from the world of kung fu to the world of gunplay and essentially inventing with his stunt coordinators gun kata or gun fu.
Yeah. It wasn't John Wick.
Right. It wasn't John Wick. It wasn't the folks of the first stunt crew on the first Matrix. It wasn't Kurt Wimmer. It wasn't the guy from Equilibrium. I think it's Kurt Wimmer. It was John Woo. It did not exist before him. He is the granddaddy or the father of Gun Fu, and it's just like if you just put a stop right there, and we never talked about this plot. We never said anything else and just said a director of 20 years took something that was not popular or well received in his country of origin and made a blockbuster film out of it. And then by so doing so, popularized gun action in a country that's anti-gun, and then also completely reinvented action cinema for the rest of time and space. You could just put a stop to this episode and say, well, then obviously A Better Tomorrow is the one that should be preserved for all time because the guy reinvented the language of action cinema.
And
That's enough.
Became an icon of himself because nobody talks about his previous films. Everybody, this is like where he started, quote unquote, where he started. So it's very unique in that sense.
Oh, and if we, you want to add a little bit extra salt and pepper to this, this is also the breakout film for a very young actor by the name of Chow Yun-fat.
Yeah, definitely. He was doing soap operas, I think, before.
Yeah. So he makes a movie star in Chow Yun-fat, who's going to have a legendary career, both sides of the pond. Makes himself an icon, creates a subgenre of the action world, and reinvents Hong Kong action cinema. Using things that were not popular before. Like that ought to be enough. But here's the thing. He's going to top himself again and again and again and again, at least through most of the string of films that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
He's obsessed. We kind of talked about this, and it's very noticeable. And I want to know what you think about this, because you mentioned the word soap opera. He is obsessed with, I would say, melodrama.
Yeah,
his action movies, especially his Hong Kong action films, are melodramas, right?
And
does that work for you, or are you like, I'm watching a soap opera?
It depends. In some of the, and we're gonna get on it as we talk about these 5 films. In some of them, it works better than in others, and some of them it doesn't work that well. But you can notice that, and I have read or heard that was sort of a trend or a staple in Hong Kong cinema, that type of melodrama with music as a score and that kind of thing. That was so that kind of softened the blow for me in some cases, because okay, if this is how it's done, then I'm gonna accept it as it is. But again, in some cases it works better than in others.
Well, so when you fire up A Better Tomorrow, right, which is the first of all of these, that you immediately I had to, I've got to flip out of my context. I've got to flip out of I'm living in 2023 where everybody for 30, 40 years now has been imitating this man and innovating on what he innovated, right? So in a sense, a lot of other directors have come along and kind of perfected and they've taken off the rough edges of something he was inventing in real time. And so I have to, flip off and go, okay, John Wick 4 had this amazing staircase sequence that's perfectly executed and it's totally smooth. But I got to take that off because John Woo's on a micro budget, has a giant ass film camera.
Yeah.
Not a little digital camera with an SD card where they can just edit in real time. He's got a giant honking film camera, and no one has ever done anything like what he's doing before. That's not an exaggeration. No filmmaker in the history of film is doing what this guy's doing, and he's doing it outside the Hollywood system, in a foreign market, in a foreign culture, making a movie that, like you said, has to play in that foreign culture, which is his indigenous culture. And so, you're getting melodrama, which is part of that heroic bloodshed film genre that was so popular in Hong Kong. all the emotional stakes are through the roof, and all the relationships are twisted and interconnected, and it's all about riding bicycles and crying and growing up together and having to kill each other and and dying and the thing is, like, I really want to get to this by the end of this episode, but it's hard not to jump ahead a little bit for me, because this whole experience for me disavowed me of the stereotypes I myself had and I myself have trafficked in about John Woo. That he's nothing more than slow-mo and doves.
Yeah.
Because when he got to America and the American Hollywood system got its hands on him, and we're going to get there by the end.
Yeah.
All of that was just reduced because he had Hollywood screenwriters. He's trying to adapt a Hong Kong style that is rooted in his faith, in Chinese philosophy, Chinese cultural experience. It's an expression of his culture, I guess is the bottom line. And yet even the slow-mo, which can be a little much, and even he admits on some of these movies, the style went a little far. But it's all in service of the genres that he's working in, which are genres we don't have here.
Yeah.
So when you try to apply Hong Kong sensibilities to American screenwriting, it just gets reduced down to nothing but sizzle, nothing but style. It's just nothing but doves and fire and whatever. We're not even recognizing the fact that, those doves are symbolic of the emotional state of the character, and they represent purity, and that ties in with his Christian beliefs. That's why there's churches and candles.
Here's doves.
We just pave over that. And did you have a similar experience? Because I know that some of these were first watches for you as well as for me.
All of them.
Did it kind of rewrite Woo in your brain, starting here with A Better Tomorrow?
No, because in a sense. And I'm going to back up a bit, and I want to ask you, because I want to ask you a question. Why me? Why did you choose this topic for me?
Well, I want to have you on the show for a long time, and I wanted you to talk about something that you never talked about before.
Because you said that you were that I came highly recommended and flattered, but it's interesting.
Well, here's the thing: when you're doing movie loots and you've covered every conceivable movie on the face of the earth, there's a lot of territory you've already covered on your own show. And so I thought it would be interesting if we took two people who know who John Woo is and have seen some of his movies, but aren't as deeply familiar, and said, okay, let's throw two, let's go to the deep cuts, and let's throw people who are having the same first exposure to some of these earlier cuts at the same time and see what we come up with, see what our experiences are.
So, because I thought it's really, really interesting because, and I think I told you this when you approached me, my experience with Woo was limited to most, not all, most of his American films. I mean, not even all of them. I had seen Broken Arrow, I had seen Face Off, and I had seen Mission Impossible 2. That's all I had seen from him. And one curious thing, I had seen all of those in theaters when they came out. So I maybe I should probably apologize in advance to Woo fans and purists because I'm a Woo newbie, and I'm going to talk about his films. But I also think so. Maybe people are going to ask, why is Jason bringing this Woobie here to talk about Woo films? But I think people might appreciate really a fresher, more unbiased perspective, and I hope to bring that to the discussion. Because I might incur the wrath of Woo fans with some of my ratings, some of my rankings. But considering that my experience was limited to those three films, two of which I didn't like that much, it was really interesting to see similar themes, because there are a lot of similar themes and parallelisms, and I hope we can get to that as we go on. But he's not shy to try different things within those limits, and we can see that as we talk about the films that we're going to discuss. And as similar as some of these films are, I see him exploring different layers within those similar relationships, and I see him
100%.
exploring different things and different themes within those quote unquote similar films. So I really appreciated that. And I can say that out of those 3 American films that I had seen, I think not. Definitely the 5 that I saw are definitely better than 2 of those that I saw. And I think most people can probably guess which one is the one that gets that stays at the top.
Sure. Well, I've thrown around a lot of terminology really fast that people may not be familiar with, and this movie people may not be familiar with. So for people who are new to A Better Tomorrow and some of these terms, let's start here. Heroic bloodshed films this is a gross generalization, but they're essentially films that are about the underworld, in particular, like criminals and killers who are often seen sympathetically. They typically tend to be the main characters, if not the outright protagonists. And it really tries to define them as real people, not just like heavies and villains and in triad movies or mobster movies or whatever. And there tends to be over-the-top ballitic translation of action. Historically, it was kung fu, but it morphed into gunplay, and so you end up with these over-the-top ballitic, super stylized, melodramatic expressions of violence and murder, and it portrays violence and murder, and in particular, like self-sacrificing death, in a very stylized, artistic sort of way. And I think what's really interesting about Woo, in this film in particular, and this sets the pattern, and I think it almost gets the balance right a little bit more than some of the other movies. But what he's doing in A Better Tomorrow is, we're getting that brother by blood versus brother by bond tropes, because you have a criminal who's an underling for the Chinese triad, who's working in counterfeiting between Hong Kong and mainland China and people in the West, Americans. And he's a high-ranking like mob guy, basically. And he has another younger mob guy who would be Chow Yun-fat, who is like a brother to him, like a younger brother to him. Yeah. He's kind of raised him up. He saved his life. They have this very strong bond, and he sees him as a younger brother in his crime world. The twist of this is he has a younger brother who also looks up and admires him and loves him and idealizes him, but his younger brother is in the police academy and doesn't know that he's a criminal. So the primary thrust of this movie is not really the action sequences. The primary thrust of the movie is this thesis, which is it's just a line in the movie. It's perfect. It distills the entire thesis down to: a bad guy for a day will never be a good guy again. That's what one of the corrupt cops tells our main character, because he essentially gets sold out by the criminal organization, and to save the life of another younger gangster, our main character turns himself in and surrenders to the police. And he goes to prison, and when he gets out of prison, he decides he's going to go the straight and narrow, right? Yeah. Like he doesn't want any more crime. He's going to live a life essentially in poverty. He's going to go back to Hong Kong and live just an ordinary life and keep himself out of trouble. And years have gone by. Yeah. I think it's like 12 years.
No, it's just
3. I'm sorry, 3. Yeah. So by this point, his brother's career, he's graduated the academy, but everybody knows that his older brother was kind of a major player in the counterfeiting part of the triad. So he's not really advancing his career beyond just graduating. And because they always bring up his brother and his name, and, well, your brother was a criminal and you didn't even know it. And what kind of cop does that make you? How are you going to be a detective? Yeah. Almost like, he's getting yelled at by his sergeants or whatever, his captains. And then Chow Yun-fat because he's lost his big brother in the organization, has become like the lowest rung in the triad, where he was injured. He was shot during one of their, during this whole melee that happens. Yeah. And so now he's like he has a limp. He's like partially paralyzed. He's debilitated. And
he's washing
turns
windows.
Out the guy he's washing. He's almost homeless, right?
Yeah, they got him like the window washer of the triad.
Yeah, and completely humiliating him. And the youngest guy who joined them on this trip to move some weapons and drugs and money and all this sort of stuff, who was assigned to them, the youngest guy, the weakest guy in the organization. Turns out he was a mover and a shaker and a ladder climber, and he screwed them all over. And he's the one that, you know, instigated this botched assassination attempt. And now he's the boss of the crime organization by the time this guy gets out of prison. And he has completely debased Chow Yun-fat, completely treated him like shit. So the guy, you know, our main character sacrifices his freedom to save the life of this young guy. It's part of the triad. Yeah. That's the guy that was screwing him over the whole time. Yeah. And his younger brother, who he didn't want to screw over, gets screwed over by him doing the right. And so the whole movie's about, what if you do the right thing and the people in your life suffer anyways? Would that be enough pressure to force you back into doing the wrong thing?
Yeah, and there are one of the themes that is very common in all these films is that of loyalty, brotherhood. That I think is the basis of all these films. Is a theme that Wu goes back to, and that betrayal from this. His name is Ching. This is the lackey that ends up at the top of the triad. There's betrayal there. And then there's that loyalty that the main guy Ho maintains towards Mark, who's Chow Yun-fat character, and those themes are one of the things that I've really, and this goes to what you were saying, but one of the themes or one of the things that I noticed that Wu is really skilled at is in building those strong brotherly relationships in all these films. Which all of them include that maybe with the exception of the last one, all these films have that. And it's a strong relationship anchored in great performances because Chow Yun-fat is great. And maybe I'm going to get in one of my minor gripes with this one. But T. Long, the guy that plays the main character, I thought he wasn't that good. I thought he was a bit bland and a bit overshadowed by Chow Yun-fat. Chow Yun-fat steals the show. Steals every scene he's in.
Yes, he does.
I think that hindered the film a bit. The fact that the main character wasn't that good or was a bit on the bland side. But regardless, you get that brotherly relationship with Chow Yun-fat and with his brother eventually as they join forces and they decide to go against this bad guy. So I think that theme of loyalty towards your brother, your family, and that bond is something that he builds very well.
Well, I struggle with this one because I'm trying to tread lightly, and I am going to for a lot of these movies because they're not easily accessible to a lot of Western audiences anymore. They are essentially out of print in many places. Like A Better Tomorrow, as we record this, is only legally available digitally through Apple TV. You can buy it through Apple, and it's a very good remastered version of it. Otherwise, you're going to have to get creative of how you find these movies, or you're going to have to get out of print. Yeah, or you're going to have to get out of print DVDs that may or may not have. They may be dubbed poorly if English or another language is your first language other than Chinese.
Yeah.
Or one of the dialects of Chinese rather, or you're going to get a subtitled version, and not all subtitled versions are made to be what they are. And some of those versions are not good video transfers. So it's really a shame that and some of them, if you want them legally and you want them remastered, you might have to import them from another country, from somewhere in Europe, and you have to have a region-free player to do that. So I want to talk about these movies, but I know that a lot of our audience hasn't necessarily seen them, and I think they're worth watching, so I don't want to spoil them. But I also know that they're extremely hard to come by. So if you hear me treading lightly or more lightly than I usually do, audience, that's kind of why. Especially with this one, because there are so many intricacies to the relationships of everybody involved that, because we talked about, Ho, who is our main character, and Mark, who is Chow Yun-fat's character. And it's Ho has to deal with the guilt he feels of This guy took a bullet for me.
Yeah.
And then I ratted, essentially, but I did it to save people. But at the same time, the consequence of that was I wasn't here to look out for him. And now that he's injured, he doesn't have a value to the organization, and he's at the lowest point of his life. And there is a bit of bitterness there on Mark's part of like, why did I took a bullet for you and you sold me out? Like you it's like what did I sacrifice this for? Look at where I'm at now. Look at where I'm at. You weren't here to protect me. And there's jealousy between Mark in particular and his brother. I think is his brother Sung? Is that right? His brother is Sung?
The cop, the one who's the cop.
Yeah.
This is Ho's brother, Ho and Kit.
Yeah, Ho's brother.
Yeah, Ho and Kit.
They're brothers. Right. That's right. Yeah, Sung Se Kit. So yeah, because it's Sung Se Ho versus Sung Se Kit.
Yeah.
So there's jealousy between Mark and Kit because he's like, Mark, again, Chow Yun-fat character, the gangster character, is like, I'm more of a brother to you than he is. Like, I took a bullet for you. Your brother disavowed you because once he found out you were a gangster, he didn't want anything to do with you. And meanwhile, it's like there's so much drama. And with this movie in particular, you get the sense that Woo is trying to make a movie with a story and characters, and the action set pieces are just part of how that story is told, as opposed to just stunts to put butts in seats. This does not feel like a movie where, and there is action in it, but it doesn't feel like a movie where he was trying to create fantastical action sequences as a driver to get people in the door. It feels as if the action sequences are in service to the story that's being told and the emotions of the characters and where the characters are. And I think it's really effective, quite honestly. These are not his best action sequences, but this may be his best story.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. Yeah, I think I agree. If you compare it with some of the ones that are going to come later, where you can feel that the action is the driving force, where you can feel that he thought, and I think I read this is I know it is true for some of his American films, but I think I read that it is true also for some of the other ones, that he thought I like this action set piece, so I'm going to write something around it just to get to that action set piece. I know that is true from Mission Impossible 2, but I think I read that it is true for example, Hard Boiled. I think he did a lot of things around that. But
the tea room scene,
yeah. But here, I think you get that sense of what you say. I think you can get here that the story, there's a stronger story that has action set pieces in it, whereas in the others you have great action set pieces with some story, tying the action set pieces together. So I get that sense of what you're talking.
Yeah, what amazed me with this one is I go into it completely cold. I don't know this movie by reputation. I don't know anything about it. I'm watching it completely as cold could be. From the opening theme to the reflection of the counterfeiting and the sunglasses and the lights and the money laundering equipment and all of that sort of stuff, and the opening like transaction where Chow Yun-fat is like pretending to speak English because he's learned a couple of phrases. Yeah. He's learned a couple of phrases to fool the Americans who are there to get the fake money and all this sort of stuff. To me, the first 10 minutes of any movie is crucial. If it gets you in the first 10 minutes, the movie probably has you.
Yeah.
If this movie got me in the first 10 minutes, and then at a certain point I realized, oh, wait a minute, I have empathy and sympathy and an emotional relationship with Ho. And I care about his relationship with Mark, and I care about his relationship with Kit. I actually care. I'm invested in these characters, which kind of took me by surprise, because sometimes when you're watching a movie like this, at least me, I find myself being kind of just passive, and I'm just waiting until the next action spectacle. Whereas with this film, I was like, you know what? I'm actually not waiting for the action spectacle. I'm invested in these characters. And what makes this movie so interesting, I think why it worked for me so well, is Woo completely skips over. Like when we meet Ho and Mark, right?
Yeah.
They're the coolest motherfuckers on the planet.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that
They're
opening does
they're
a
in the
great
black
job.
suits,
Yeah, the glasses,
the sunglasses.
Is that when
they're in luxury vehicles and
Cho Yun-fat
sports
is
cars.
lighting the cigarette with the counterfeit dollar, right? That's a cover
Oh
image.
yeah.
I think that's
Yeah. It's like Tarantino sucked every ounce of coolness from these characters and put it in Pulp Fiction. 100%.
Yeah.
They're fit. They're out. Their look. Like everything about them is. Oh, I see what you did. Like the suits, and they're just like, these are the coolest guys on earth.
Yeah.
They're badass. They're slick as shit, and we're there at the tail end of their supremacy and their coolness.
Yeah.
The rest of this movie, after that first 10 minutes, is all about their debasement. It's them at the bottom. It's Ho having to live in the garage where he works with other convicts to just have subsistence living in Hong Kong. It's Chow Yun-fat in literal rags, like you said, washing the windows like a homeless person or person experiencing homelessness of the guy who was his lackey, washing his car and being treated with utter disrespect and contempt. And just be that you're watching these guys be beat down dogs. And I think it's so interesting. It's like we meet them and we never get to see them at the top of the mountain. We see just the tail end of it. Yeah. And the rest of it is them in hell, which is a reoccurring thing again for John Woo. It's like, hey, I'm going to make the coolest guy who's ever lived, and you're just going to watch him go to hell.
And some of these examples are literal hell. Some of these films end in fire around our characters. Yeah.
Oh, that's my point. Yeah. I mean, he's visually, he sends these characters to hell, like you said, where it's very clear that's what he's going for is they're burning in hell at the end of the movie.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so I found the approach to this to be way more compelling than I thought it was going to be. And for the record, there are 0 doves that make an appearance in this film, or birds of any kind. So, what did you think about it? Am I praising it too much, or you're like, this is boring, I didn't like it? Where are the explosions?
No, we're gonna get to the rating in a while, but I enjoyed it overall. I thought there were flaws, and my main gripe with it, I already shared it. I thought that our main character wasn't as interesting, or at least as captivating as the two supporting or the two more supporting characters. I think Chow Yun-fat, like I said, steals every scene, and he overshadows the other actor. I think that the guy that plays Kit, Leslie Chung, I think he's emotional. I think I lean more towards his emotional baggage than I did to Host.
Yeah.
But since they are the supporting characters, they are more in the sidelines, and the ones that's the lead, I wasn't that invested in. I thought he was and it was more the performance, not necessarily the character or how he was written. It's more the performance. Not that he was bad, but he was a bit bland, a bit on the bland side, overshadowed by these other two actors. Even the bad guy. Even the bad guy, I thought the bad guy was really good. Weasley, which we're going to see him again in Bullet in the Head. I thought it was great. The bad guy was great. And so we're left with this main character who's a bit on the bland side, overshadowed by other characters that are more colorful. Even though I understand his predicament or his moral conflict or whatever, but that kept me a bit at bay from the film.
I totally understand where you're coming from. I think the way that he's playing it, and maybe it's written this way, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't the actor's choice. But Ho everybody else is freaking out around him in one way or another, right? Like you said, the villain's way more colorful. He's just like this ruthless, vicious, like arrogant scumbag. So he gets to choose scenery. The brother goes from sort of being naive, young, innocent. And it's a very actorly role because we get to see him basically in two different phases of his life, where he goes from young, naive, innocent. My big brother is the greatest guy in the world. Yeah. And he's literally like, they're like wrestling in the park, and all this sort of stuff, and they're like, he's a kid almost. And then flip around 3 years later, and now he's kind of a grizzled cop, and he's bitter at his brother, and he gets to play the opposite emotional spectrum. The same thing goes with Chow Yun-Fat's character, where Mark gets to be kind of a deeply loyal, but almost kind of carefree, cocky, super cool hitman killer. But then we see the opposite end of the spectrum where he has no confidence, where his personal confidence has been totally shot. He has no self-worth whatsoever. And Ho just has to kind of be the rock. And that's a fundamentally less interesting character when you're surrounded by people like Leslie Chung and Chow Yun-Fat and Wesley, who are very charming, right? And get more colorful characters. So you got 3 charming guys with very compelling characters with huge emotional swings versus the guy that's just kind of got to like try to be quiet and hold all together. So I totally hear what you're saying. Yep. I really enjoy it. I do not think it's a bad movie, but it's only my number 4 for the week. And I give it an 8.5 out of 10. Where is it ranked for you, and what's your score?
Okay, I can agree with you. First of all, I tend to rank with 5 stars. So what I'm doing here is I'm stretching that scale to 10. So if, for example, if I had a film at 2.5 out of 5, it would get here a 5 out of 10. Not the traditional school-based scale of 6 is like a D, 67 is like a C, 70. Just to have it clear, I heard you blasting others for their rankings. No, but this wasn't as polished as other action films I've seen, and or maybe even other of the Wu films that we're going to talk about. But I thought it was a worthy film. I thought it was a great introduction to Hong Kong cinema, something that I'm not that familiar with. So with that said, I also have it at 4th place, and I had it at 3 out of 5 on my scale, which would translate to let's say a 6.5 out of 10.
6.5, brutal, Carlo.
I guess it's gonna get worse.
All right, let's move on to a film that has a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm talking about maybe his most popular Hong Kong film, maybe The Killer, which is literally translated as a pair of blood spattering heroes.
What a translation.
One of the 10 best films of the year, a high-octane mixture of outlandishly stylized camp and outrageously sensational shootouts. Outrageously exhilarating, guaranteed to tingle the most jaded moviegoer's palate. A film concocted with nitroglycerin, the combined energy of the Road Warrior, RoboCop, and the Terminator. The Killer is great cinema. The Killer, a thriller comedy that will leave you breathless.
The film was directed and written by John Woo. It was released July 6, 1989, on a budget of not available. It made $18.26 million in Hong Kong. A compassionate hitman attempts to right a wrong caused by the collateral damage of his violent life.
2 guys on different sides of the law become like brothers and join forces to take down the triad boss that betrayed one of them.
Okay, so we're already into the territory of tropes. So this is a reiteration of the last movie we saw. There's some more tropes here, though. And some of these tropes I love. Trope number 1 is one last hit.
Yeah.
There's always a hit person, a man or a female. It's like, I got one more job and I'm out.
Yeah.
Which is what made the original John Wick so refreshing, because they already skipped that whole part and he accomplished it and he actually managed to get out. Yeah. He's already out. So we don't have to tell that story. Now we're way down the road. There's always the trope. It's always connected. It's that it's one last hit, but the hit person, hit man, woman, gets burned by the bad guys and chased by the cops. by typically one obsessed cop, right?
Yeah.
There's one obsessed cop that's like on this person's trail. And so they have to outrun the people they used to work for, maybe outrun the person they tried to kill if they're not in cahoots, and try to outrun the cops. It's always the same thing. In this, again, between Hitman Ah Jong and Inspector Lee, we get another duality of criminal versus cop, opposite sides of the law, but they have the same values. And in this case, they've kind of fallen in love with the same woman, right?
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah. But here we see again what we were. I mean, to get first into what you were talking about tropes. Here we get a lot more parallelisms. I mean, fights against triads, climatic standoff at the end, cop versus criminal, that brotherly bond. Those are the themes that we're gonna see pretty much in all these films. But here again, that brotherly relationship between Chow Yun-fat, Ah-young, and Lee is the backbone. Here, that relationship is so strong, and again, Wu does such a great job in building those kind of relationships. But since you mentioned the female character, I don't know why he's not as successful in building romantic relationships or female relationships, because the female relationships that we see in all these films are really weak. They don't work.
They are weak. Yes.
But it's weird because the relationship between the quote unquote brothers is so strong and so well. I mean, even the relationship between Ah-young and his friend, the mentor that's tried to like protect him, is very strong.
Yes,
is a relationship that feels organic, that feels realized, that feels really strong down to the very end, but not with Jenny, who's the girl. And even I think this is the strongest female relationship from all the films that we're going to talk about.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. This is the best one.
Contrast you. This is the best one.
Yeah. I agree.
Jenny's like a lounge singer.
Yeah.
And she's a lounge singer at this club, and that is semi-involved in the criminal underworld and blah, 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 blah. And she's not a part of any of that. She just sings at this club. Yeah. And you have a cop. And the thing is, like, she does like almost like jazz lounge singing, like true lounge singer. And so she's very pretty.
That's another
and
trope,
sort of,
the jazz singing.
Yes. He loves jazz music. And so Chow Yun-fat is our hitman. He is the killer. And he's Ah Jong, and he is kind of in love with her. He's smitten with her, right? He's smitten with the idea of her. But during his last job, when he's going to get burned and everything goes sideways, he actually goes to protect her from crossfire. But when he goes to fire, the flash from his muzzle blinds her. It burns her corneas. Yeah. And he feels personally responsible for having blinded this woman that he is in love with. And so he comes back into the talk about, I mean, this is soap opera stuff again, right?
She doesn't know that it was him.
He comes back into her life because she didn't really know him. He's just a guy at the bar. He comes back into her life after she's been blinded and meets her, quote unquote, all over again. And essentially doesn't let her know that he's the guy, he's the killer that blinded her, and it's all his fault. And he begins to court her and take care of her and be nice to her. And they begin to fall in love. And at the same time, the cop that's hot on his trail, who's Inspector Lee, also begins to develop romantic feelings for her in a sense. And so they're obsessed with each other. They're obsessed with this girl. And Chow Yun-fat has been betrayed. He's been betrayed by his handler. His handler was put in a position where he feels so guilty for betraying him. He spends the rest of the movie atoning for it, as like whipping himself, self-flagellating to the point where by the end of the movie, he's damn near crucified. And just to prove his loyalty back to this guy. And this is really now, and I say that almost not semi-facetiously, because Wu is a devout Christian, which is exceptionally unusual, especially for his age, for someone in Hong Kong. So he's a religious minority in his own culture, and he infuses a lot of his movies, especially starting here, with Christian ideas and Christian iconography. And one of the ways that he contrasts the hitman, and John Wick totally stole this, but the way he contrasts the hitman with the inspector is that they are of different faiths. And so we see the inspector in a more traditional temple, and we see the hitman in a Catholic church.
Yeah.
And there's the use of candles. I think we get some of our first doves here, which again ties into the Holy Spirit, which ties into Christian iconography.
The final standoff is in a church.
Yeah, the final standoff is in a church. At one point, the hitman, there's flat out conversations about religious themes and religious ideas. The Chow Yun-Fat's character is getting bullets taken out of his back in the pews of a church.
Yeah.
You know, it's very and as a devout Christian, what he is doing is he's taking violence, because this is when you have a faith that is built around the idea of a savior who was crucified. That's a violent imperial act against who you believe to be the rightful king of the world. And so the violence of empire being turned on its head through the crucifixion and resurrection. And that's what resurrection does. The idea of resurrection is that sort of God in Christ passively takes the violence of the world and death and overcomes violence and death through nonviolence and through, love, ultimately.
You can,
enemy love.
And you can extend that to what Chow Yun-Fat wants to do in the end. I mean, if yes. I die, I want you to do this, because this is not a spoiler, but he says, I want you to donate my corneas for Jenny so she can see, so she can have her surgery. So essentially, he's saying, I want to sacrifice myself so you can see, or you can have sight again.
And you're 100% right. And here's the thing. We're talking about an extraordinarily violent filmmaker who makes extraordinarily violent films. But Wu is on record as being a Christian pacifist. And he hates violence. He detests it personally.
Yeah,
his idea is he wants to use violence to make an argument for peacemaking.
Yeah.
And you actually can see that in his films, because even to this one, every time, even in the end, when our heroes resort to violence, it never works.
Yeah.
Violence is never the answer, and almost all of these movies end, even if the good guys, quote unquote, win and the bad guys, quote unquote, lose. The good guys end up losing a part of their soul in the process of using violence.
Yeah.
It's always a down ending, even if the good guys win. It's a very low you ended a low place.
Yeah, I think this was the one that I found the ending to be the most tragic, or the most
it's horrible,
the one that hit me the hardest. But yeah, definitely to that point where you see, and I'm not gonna spoil anything, because there's a really wicked twist in the ending, that if people haven't seen it, I had it spoiled before, but I don't want to do that. But it's something that, to a point that I was making, does that sacrifice really work?
Right?
It's really, really a really good ending. Tragic but good. I love it.
Well, he's wrestling with that question of, even when we use violence for supposed noble ends and noble causes, it actually just leads to more destruction of the innocent. And he's going to get to that again, quite literally. He's going to send some characters to hell.
Yeah.
And he's going to make a commentary about Vietnam and all kind of stuff. It's just, what I think it is this is going to sound hyperbolic, but I don't mean it to be. Like a great many of the classical artists who especially are working in Christian theological tradition, that Wu, what he really is he's a philosopher and he's a theologian who's telling stories through an accessible medium, while also challenging his audience at the very least at that time in Hong Kong, with telling them stories using violence, but using violence in a way that they're not used to make a larger point as a religious minority in that culture. So to the idea that this man has crossed over into Hong Kong from a religious minority perspective, working in gunplay, which is something that was not prevalent, not popular. They were not interested in it. Then crossing over to American audiences and being able to make, much larger budgeted films than the ones he's making here, and indelibly put his stamp on action cinema. It is a incredible shame that all of his movies are not currently remastered in 4K and widely available to audiences around the world. That's what I'll say, because like if you like Face Off, what Face Off does is Face Off literalizes the poetry that is The Killer.
Yeah.
The Killer is poetry, and Face Off is just, what if we took all of these, like all this subtext and all this iconography and all this heartfelt pathos, and we just literalize it into American cartoon comic book land. And here's the thing, you can like either one of those. I'm not shaming you if you like Face Off. I get it. What I'm saying is his best, most delicate, intricate, intellectually interesting, emotionally moving work is in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I agree.
And this is one of them. And Chow Yun-fat, if he was good in A Better Tomorrow, he is truly a leading man in this movie. He is phenomenal as this character.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I definitely like the way that, I already talked about how he builds that relationship, but I like how that relationship grows, because you believe it.
Yes.
You see how they start this cat and mouse play between Chow Yun-fat and Lee. And you see that, but you see how in that game they earned each other's respect, and you see how that chemistry, and you see how that grows, and it's done in such a way that you feel it, you can feel it, but it's so cool. It's done in such cool images and set pieces and moments in the film. That it wins in both sides. It wins in how you're invested in the characters, but it wins also in how cool it looks and how great the action set pieces and the moments. For example, one of my favorite moments, the moment in the apartment where they're pointing each other the guns and they keep. It's almost like a dance. It's a dance. I mean, it's so fluid. So it's great. I mean, that's one of my favorite scenes from this film.
This movie's loaded with great standoffs. That's a great standoff because they're trying to pretend like everything's normal.
Yeah.
Because she's blind. She knows both of them, but she doesn't know their real names and doesn't know that one's a cop and one's a villain.
Yeah.
And doesn't know what's really going on between them. And so they got to pretend like, oh, well, I just ran into this guy at the grocery store or flower market and and I invited him up and everything's great. And they got guns pointed at each other. And it's almost sitcom-y, but it's. And what I realized is I'm sitting there watching like the fifth Mexican gun standoff in this movie, and I'm going, I think John Woo is a master of tension in this era, and he's got the best gun standoffs since Sergio Leone, and might be better than Sergio Leone. Like these may be the best standoffs I've ever seen in a movie, because here's the thing with Woo, anything could happen.
Yeah.
Anybody can die at any point in this movie. Yeah. And tragedy is just around the corner. So there's real stakes in every time somebody pulls a gun. And that's another thing I really enjoyed about this movie was I liked the fact that, he ups the action for sure. And yes, it's expertly crafted, but it still feels handcrafted.
Yeah.
And it's slightly rough around the edges still. And the thing about the modern sort of ultra clean, stylized, action popularized by like The Matrix is, if you really think about it, that action only ever really made sense of The Matrix because it's not the real world. The premise of the film is it's not the real world, and Neo is bending the laws of the computer program. The moment you have people behaving like Neo in the real world with just effortless blocking and dodging and throwing punches and kicks, all this sort of stuff, and defying physics and gravity, all this sort of stuff, it's never worked for me as well. So I like the idea that this is a little bit rough, because if you've ever been in a real fight, it ain't pretty. And if you've ever seen a real fight, It's not pretty. And even if you had two master hitmen shooting it out, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be completely flawless execution. So I kind of like it. I also think that two things. Luc Besson owes his entire career to John Woo.
Yeah.
And Fung in this movie, who's the handler character, feels very much like Willem Dafoe's character in John Wick during certain parts, especially when he's getting the literal blood beat out of him and he won't turn on Wick or he won't turn on Zhang. I was just like, oh, this is the first John Wick is a John Woo movie.
Yeah.
100%.
I can see that, but even then, I think this is more realized and better than Willem Dafoe. To me, feels a bit wasted in John Wick in the first one.
It's definitely a better character. Yes. Yeah.
But I totally see where you're coming from. But I don't know. I really enjoyed, and there's something I agree with what you said, that this is definitely more polished than A Better Tomorrow. It feels better. You can see that his skills are better. But the even though it's real, and I agree with what you said, the action set pieces are so fluid, so dense, like so operatic.
Yeah.
And there are so many things, and it's common in all the other films, where you can see that what the characters are doing doesn't necessarily make sense in a real stand-up. Right. I mean, the way you jump, the way you shoot your guns, because I've read that shooting two guns at the same time doesn't make any sense, that you're gonna have any accuracy. But it looks cool. That's the thing. It looks cool.
It looks especially cool when Chow Yun-fat is doing it.
I think he's the best. I mean, all the actors that John Woo tries to do it, but Chow Yun-fat is the best one that does it. But all those choreographies and set pieces are so harmoniously constructed that I mean, I was in awe. I was watching this film. I was definitely in awe. I was this is great.
Carlo, I'm on the same page because I'm sitting there, right? I'm watching this. I hadn't seen this one before either.
No.
And I'm watching it, and I think to myself, wow, what an incredible climax to a film.
Yeah.
And it was the house assault. And I wasn't even aware that we weren't even close to the actual climax, which is at the church. I was like, wow, what an incredible ending this is. And I didn't realize that, you ain't seen nothing yet. This is the middle set piece. The end is yet to come, and it is going to be insane and rip your guts out, rip your heart out, which it did.
Yeah.
So I knocked this one a couple of points only because he has this fascination with freeze frame. And rather than having typical scene transitions, he freezes the frame and then just starts the next scene. So rather than like cross dissolving, anywhere where you would see a dissolve or a cross dissolve or cross cutting, he puts a freeze frame, especially in this movie. And you're like, ooh, those transitions are kind of weird. But then I kind of upped it another point because of the ending. I thought this ending was phenomenal. I don't want to spoil it, but I thought it was masterfully done. That being said, it's only my number 2 for the week. I give it a 9.25. 9.25 out of 10.
Okay. I already praise a lot of what I like about this film. It is my number 1. I really love this one. It is my favorite.
Makes sense.
And I have it on my scale at 4.5 out of 5, which would probably translate to a 9 or 9.5, however you wanna convert it. This is my number 1. One thing that I wanna mention, and it goes to the tropes that we've been watching, but it was really interesting to me to watch certain elements that John Woo or other directors use on other films. For example, simple things. For example, the use of boats, which he uses again in the climax of Face Off. Here it is in the middle or in the first act. He uses that, so he likes that. But I don't know if I'm alone in this, but I totally got LA Confidential vibes from the final standoff.
I could totally see that.
To me, it was like side by side the final standoff between the cops in LA Confidential and the final standoff here. down to the point to how it ends. And I don't want to spoil it, but I thought this is LA Confidential. This is the same. But I'm gonna leave it at that. So again, this is my first one. I loved it. So if this is how it works, this is the one that goes to the vault or the best of the week or however you want to call it.
You're adding it to the guest list. That's correct.
That's
yeah.
it.
And yeah. Well, let's move on to 1990's Bullet in the Head, which currently has a 100% Rotten Tomatoes. And this is where Carlo's going to piss off the internet. I've already seen the tweets.
Oh my God.
In a time of great expectation, courage is born in the hearts of three friends, and hope awakens a dream of a future destined for greatness. But now, in a moment of truth, a single act of defiance will change their lives forever. And redemption will become a treasure forever lost.
Bullet in the Head was directed by John Woo. It was written by John Woo, Patrick Leung, Waze Lee, and Simon Yam. It was released August 17th, 1990 on $3.5 million Hong Kong. It made $8.5 million in Hong Kong. As long as, here we go. As long as they can remember, three childhood friends have always wanted to be gangsters. Then they achieved it.
Three friends that are like brothers on the fringes of the law flee from Hong Kong to Vietnam and join forces with a hitman and eventually have to take down the one that betrayed them.
We get a lot of reoccurring players here. I didn't know what this movie was. Didn't know, and this is probably the one I knew the least about going into it, honestly.
I think that's the same with me.
Damn, this movie is hard to come by. It's hard to find. I had to import it from Italy just to be able to get a Blu-ray version of it. And I watched it two ways. I watched it without subtitles. And so it's just in Chinese because the subtitles would be in Italian. Right? And there's no dub version of it. And a lot of the dubs of these are terrible.
Gorlomi.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And then I watched it with English subtitles. I think that the sign of a true great movie, we always talk about show, don't tell, blah, 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 is can you understand the movie if you don't understand the language and you don't even have subtitles? And the first time I watched it, and then when I eventually rewatched it with subtitles, I didn't miss anything. I thought it was an interesting experiment. I'm like, well, like this is the only version I got. I got to fire it up and I'm going to have to find it again and watch it again. I didn't miss a thing. I some of the dialogue, but as far as who the characters were, what their motivations were, what their emotions were, plot points, he's such a visual storyteller. And because it's such melodrama and everything's played so big,
yeah.
and by big, I mean, at a certain point, this movie becomes The Deer Hunter and then it becomes Platoon. And it's just a full-on, he's blowing the shit out of the jungle. And at some point, it almost feels as if he's trying to make his own apocalypse now. It's as if he's trying to be Coppola at certain points. That was my question. Is this John Woo's Apocalypse Now? Because the heaviness, the intensity, it goes from Diner to Goodfellas to Deer Hunter to Rambo 2 to Apocalypse Now. Maybe that won't work for everybody, but it's like it goes from being like these 40-year-old guys who are pretending they're teenagers, riding their bicycles, pretend they're driving sports cars, to freaking a harrowing Vietnam movie, to then a revenge movie. It's insane, this film. And I mean that in a good way.
You were saying about watching it without subtitles. I think it was Hitchcock that said that the sign of great movie is that you can watch it with the volume turned off, and you can even get what is happening. You can even enjoy it. One of my very great friends and a past guest at my show, he's a huge fan of Wu, and he told me, if you think A Better Tomorrow needed some Mean Streets and the Deer Hunter flavoring, this is a bullet in the head. I can appreciate the ambitious scope. I can appreciate what he was trying to spread his wings a bit. But I don't think he fully delivered. And I know I'm going to incur the wrath of Wu fans because I said this is 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. A lot of films,
Yes.
a lot of friends already chastised me when I said I wasn't a fan of this on Twitter. They said, "How come? No." But I found there was like a tonal dissonance between the violence and the drama. I would have preferred that it leaned more into the drama. But it was like, okay, here we have a dramatic moment, and there we're gonna have a big shootout with blood spurting out of everything. So
this is, even by Wu standards, this is an exceptionally violent film.
Yeah, but I think the last act, it starts well, but then it goes into this clumsy, hypercharged chase scene that instead of being something more emotional, a conflict between two childhood friends that are at odds with each other, it's just this mindless, brainless chase from one side to the other with bikes and cars and fire and whatnot.
I understand what he's doing. What he's doing is he's going back to the beginning of, literally back to the places that they were at.
Yeah,
when
and he
children.
juxtaposes the scenes with the car and the bicycles, the car and the bicycles.
Yeah.
I get it, but
I don't know that we needed him to intercut back to make his point of being like, let me intercut back to, is like, see, they were racing bikes, now they're racing cars, and they were brothers before, but now they're trying to kill each other, and blah, blah, blah. I get what you're saying, because I think he does such a great job with the drama of these three characters and where their ambitions, their shared ambitions, take them, and then ultimately divide them, and kind of ultimately sort of bring them back together at odds with each other, and really the whole this movie in particular is all about a descent into hell. The further these guys go into life of sin, the more, in that way, it's almost like a Scorsese film, that the further into hell we go with them, until we're literally in like the ninth circle of hell, and it's Dante's Inferno, and it's just nothing but flames and burning alive, and and just total ruination of the innocence of their childhood or whatever. I get it. I think he does so well with that drama. And I think the personal drama of these three characters is so dialed in, and we believe these relationships. And then when you go and you juxtapose that to POW experiences in Vietnam, where they are Chinese, not really expats, but they're on the lam for this killing, and then they go and they hide in Vietnam to run weapons to make money in Saigon, and then of course all hell breaks loose in Saigon, Vietnam War, so it's worse there than had they stayed in Hong Kong, and then everything goes to shit from there, further and further and further, until they are in a camp being tortured by the Viet Cong and being forced to do horrific things, to kill South Vietnamese soldiers and American soldiers against their will at gunpoint, or you'll die, or I'll kill your friend, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to hold your friend, your brother at gunpoint, and I'm going to put a rifle in your hand, and you have to kill these American soldiers and these South Vietnamese army folks, or we're going to blow your friend's brains out in front of you. Either you blow this person's brains out, or we blow your friend's brains out. It doesn't pull any punches when it comes to blowing people's brains out. It's horrific. And you see the emotional mental toll where they essentially have almost like psychotic breaks, because it's dry. They've already been in prison for so long, and they've been beaten, and they're hung up, and it's awful. When you go from something that heavy and those big emotional stakes and commentary really on violence in the Vietnam War and colonialism and all this sort of stuff that's in this movie, and then the movie just boils down to another standard John Woo action movie, even if those action set pieces at the end are really well done, even though that's a good car chase, it's a car chase. And we've just seen you blow up, like wherever he filmed this, it'd be Cambodia, or if he actually went to Vietnam, I'm not sure. We've just seen you blow up a hillside.
Yeah.
We've seen you have like napalm explosions going off as villages of hundreds of people are marching, fleeing for their lives, right? You can't just go back to in this same movie. Well, we're just gonna fire guns at each other as fire and doves. Like, it just doesn't. I totally get what you're saying.
What really saved it for me, and are the strong performances. I mean, Tony Long is great,
Incredible performance,
and Weasley again, who was a bad guy in A Better Tomorrow. He here plays again one of the friends. And I thought it was great too. I really loved their friend. The other guy is good too. Jackie Chung, I think his name. He was really good too. But again, here we have another instance where you have this strong brother relationship with unsuccessful romantic relationships, because there's this woman Sally that they try to save. I think she's a singer as well that they try
she's
to
a loud
save.
Singer,
And
that's brutal though. That is brutal.
But the way that she's not that well established a character, I thought, and even the relationship with Ben is Tony Long's character with his wife, that he abandoned her to flee from Hong Kong, and then he comes back, and that relationship, which could have been it's brief, but it could have been maybe stronger. It's not that strong.
Well, I agree with you there, because that's the inciting incident for the film, right? Is the hothead. There's three friends. One of them's a hothead. And that's Frank. And Frank is the one, he goes and secures a loan from a loan shark to pay for Ben's wedding.
Yeah.
And then on the way back from the loan shark with a big fat wad of money in his pocket, a rival gang beats him up, tries to take the money.
Yeah.
And then he's all jacked up and they're all liquored up from the wedding. And they're like, all right, like, he got the money. This is the most insane part. He got his money back.
Yeah.
So they didn't successfully rob him. They tried to rob him. And they're like, okay, well, let's go shake those guys down. And Frank loses it and kills the guy.
Yeah.
And now they're wanted for murder in Hong Kong, which is not a place you want to be wanted for murder in. And so they're like, we have to flee Hong Kong. And they decide, of all places, well, I know someone from the mainland who's running guns
let's go
in
a literal
in Vietnam,
from the frying pan to the
right.
fire,
And that's so I 100% agree with you, because if the inciting incident for Ben is there's this character, there's this woman, I love her, we got married, and what should have been the happiest day of my life has descended into hell, into a murder. We should definitely know her more, especially because you're going to bring it back around.
Yeah.
And when he eventually does see her again, I think that, I don't want to spoil it, but that payoff there would have been, I think, even more heartbreaking.
Yeah. And
the biggest thing that doesn't work for me, and I eventually adapted to it, I want to see if this bothered you as well. We spend so much time building that triad, no pun intended, building that trio of these three childhood friends. And it's all about how they interact with each other, and their different personalities, and how they're similar and how they're dissimilar. And that's ultimately going to lead to how they grow apart and how they grow against each other. And then at a certain point, Simon Yam's character just comes in as Luke, and he's like, well, he's just part of the gang now. And it's like, nothing against Simon. I really liked him. I liked the Luke character. And boy, does he end up suffering for their sins as well. But he felt inserted. It was like, wait, where are we? Could you not have just made him the fourth friend? Could it not have been four friends at the beginning? Why do we need this guy to all of a sudden become another brother? It just felt odd. You know, am I off base, or do you see what I'm saying?
You know, the weird thing is that I was going to say right before you said it, I want to mention Simon Yam because I really like his character. Yeah. And it's, again, another instance. I totally understand what you're saying, and I think I agree. But it's yet another instance of how this relationship between, okay, we got this already well-established relationship between these three friends, and they insert this fourth character towards the second act of the film, and yet it works. For me, it worked. And it's weird, again, because you get the brotherly relationship successfully built around 3 or 4 characters, and yet he can do the same with females. It's so weird. It's something that blows my mind.
Yeah.
At one point, where this character Sally, they were saving it, and at one point, okay, so wait a minute, was she with Luke? Was she Luke's? I didn't even get that. It was, I don't know. It was a bit messy for me.
Well, I can't remember if it's Ben or Frank or Paul. But one of our main three is kind of in love with her.
Yeah.
Or has eyes for her or whatever. But then he finds out that she's sort of linked to Luke's character. Yeah.
But I didn't get that.
That's going to put clear. That. No, it wasn't, and that kind of puts them at odds against each other. But then they become brothers because it just I ended up I like his character, and he ended up fitting in with the group, especially as the movie went on. But it felt like the second act is a really weird time to introduce a fourth character who's a total stranger to these three guys who grew up together. For him to be another guy that seems like he grew up with, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just felt like that's a weird time to introduce him.
I don't know.
Could have just been an older kid from the neighborhood that they knew and were close with, who that's how they got the gig in Saigon, because they knew him and he'd gone ahead. I don't know. I'm nitpicking, but that was the biggest standout where I was like,
Commercial alert, commercial alert. There are so many ways to have fun at Funtown, USA. You can ride Thunder Falls, New England's longest and tallest log flow ride. Don't forget the Sea Dragon and Casino Ride, two of our newest attractions. Family fun is waiting for you at Funtown, USA. Route 1, Taco. Funtown, USA.
But maybe they needed that character, that extra character, to be the one that is sort of the one that leads Ben to
Frank.
To Frank in the end. But again, it doesn't cancel your point. Yeah.
The movie, it's called A Bullet in the Head. There's a very obvious we won't spoil it for people who haven't seen it. It has a very specific meaning.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what you realize is a bullet in the head, based on the events of this film, with no spoilers, could be a foolish mistake. It could be a means to survive. It could be government execution. It could be a cruel game of torture. It could be the ultimate betrayal. It could be an act of mercy. And it could be a gesture of empty justice or vengeance.
Yeah.
Because there's not one bullet in the head.
Yeah.
Spoilers. There are quite a few. And I think beyond just a title and beyond what your mind immediately goes to, when you really look at the movie, you see that, he's showing us every possible iteration of the intention and the result of a bullet in the head or a bullet to the head. And every single time it's horrible. It's just a different version of horror. It's just a different version of, which ultimately, I think the movie, we're still in the world of gangsters and criminals and mobsters. But ultimately, what he's telling is he's telling an anti-war story, an anti-Vietnam story. And what he's ultimately saying is, whatever ends you want to accomplish, again, it's being repetitive, but whatever ends you want to accomplish, you're never going to accomplish peace at the end of a barrel. It doesn't happen. An instrument of violence can never lead to peace. It's just you reap what you sow. And so if you sow violence, you reap violence. You don't ever reap peace. And I think that's his point. And I think that's part of the point of this movie. And I think it's masterful how Vietnam is the context and it's the backdrop, but the emotional core is these three guys. So there's no point of which a character has to give a speech like they would in an American movie going, and this is how my feelings correlate with the Vietnam War. That never happens. This isn't a casualties of war where Michael J. Fox eventually has to stand before a tribunal and disavow the Vietnam War. It doesn't ever have to go there.
And helps a Vietnamese woman in the end in San Francisco.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It never has to tell that story because the story it's telling with these three or four gentlemen is the story in a sense of violence and all war. And so it's very universal in that way. And because of those reasons, it slightly edges out The Killer. I give it a 9.5 out of 10. It's my number one. I'm putting it on the short list.
So we're going to the other end of the spectrum.
No.
But yeah, and I liked it. It's not. I mean, it wasn't awful at all, but there were just too many things that didn't really work for me. It was a bit messy. The message modeled.
Well,
I didn't.
Can I ask you a question? Yeah. Is this one harder for you to forgive its flaws because it's so ambitious? Because it's a bigger movie in scope.
Yeah.
And he's attempting to do more. And quite frankly, it's like up to this point, it's his best looking movie. It's his best directed movie. Does that make the flaw stand out for you even more? Because to make it harder to forgive because it's not a small gangster movie?
Maybe, and I think we might get to that when we talk about one of the coming films. But I think it has something to do with expectations. But overall, I think that again, it was like too much mashed together, and I didn't really feel it. Maybe I should give it another spin. I'm willing to give it another spin and see if it works better now that I'm warmed up to what is happening. But I told you, I warned everybody, this is the one that would incur in the wrath of Wu fans. I have it at the bottom. This is my number 5.
Damn.
I had it at 2.5 out of 5 on my scale. Which is pretty much at the middle.
It's like a 5 out of 10.
And that's 5.5. Let's put it 5.5. So it's
5.5. Damn.
Sorry, the Woobers.
Fuck! 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 Fuck!
Bring it. I can back it up.
Well, let's move on to if it isn't the killer, it is this movie. This is the wooiest woo that ever wooed in Hong Kong. 1992's Hard Boiled, which currently has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes.
On dark streets, where violence consumes everything it touches, and the innocent live in fear, 2 men dedicated to justice will follow different paths. As one searches for revenge and the other for redemption, fate will bring them together. Now, for those who hide behind the shadow of corruption, only one thing is certain: a day of reckoning is coming.
Hard Boiled was directed by John Woo. It was written by Gordon Chan and Barry Wong. It was released April 16th, 1992, on a budget of $4.5 million. It made $19.7 million in Hong Kong and $71,000 in the United States. A cop on the edge and an undercover who has gone too deep team up to find a ruthless arms dealer's cash.
2 guys on different sides of the law become like brothers and join forces to take down the triad boss that has wronged them.
Okay, a little bit of history here. I don't know if you know this, but Michelle Yeoh was originally supposed to be Chow Yun-fat's ex/girlfriend, on again, off again girlfriend, basically. And when she couldn't do the movie because she was contractually obligated for another film, they just cut the role to shreds and then just made it a nothing role. So we you're complaining about a lack of female representation in these movies. The one movie where he was going to do it didn't work out, and they couldn't get a suitable replacement.
Yeah.
So.
You can definitely
This also
see
covers, yes. This also covers the thing that you noted, which was now we're in the point of his career where he's thinking set piece first and story second.
Yeah.
And they had a location that he really liked, which was this tea house, which is one of the opening action set pieces of the movie, or early ones rather. And he doesn't. They were going to demo the tea house. They're going to tear it down. It was an old historic building. They were making room for other stuff. And so they didn't just script it; they shot that whole tea house action sequence before they had a script for the film. And they were just like, "We'll shoot it, we'll figure it out," because he wanted Chow Yun-fat to come down the rail on his side, firing 2 pistols.
So everything was built around that single.
Correct. Then they were like, we'll figure out how to make the story work. And I'll be honest with you, it doesn't really, it's a great sequence, but I'm like, wait, what did that, it doesn't really fit in the overall narrative of the movie. It really doesn't. Let me ask you this. As a movie looter, as a movie connoisseur, as a movie expert, is Chow Yun-Fat the only action hero to ever play the oboe?
To ever play what? Oh yeah,
the oboe.
Yeah. I think I don't remember anybody. I mean, you can see everybody playing sax, but was it an oboe or was it a clarinet?
I think it's an oboe, isn't it?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Anybody that's listening can correct us. Either way, the same kind of looking instrument, a long wind instrument.
Chow Yun-Fat is playing a jazz woodwind instrument while being a grizzled cop. Grizzled cop by day, jazz woodwind
musician by night.
This is where you officially reach, officially, you reach firing two guns while jumping through the era of John Woo. This is what kicks it all off.
Yeah.
The movie is called Hard Boiled. And if you don't understand what Hard Boiled is, it's fair enough. But Hard Boiled is almost kind of an insider movie term. It's not really I guess it would be kind of a subgenre, but it's almost like a subgenre. It's an offshoot of film noir where you would have described typically like criminal and detective dialogue as being hard boiled. You know, that it's usually they're cop and crime movies, which obviously all these other ones are, but where those lean towards a heroic bloodshed and more sort of Asian tropes, or at least Chinese tropes. He's essentially making a movie that is leaning into Western tropes, but through a Chinese or Hong Kong lens, more so than he ever has. He's making a hard-boiled, kind of noir, badass American detective movie with a cop on the edge, and an undercover who's, like literally the character's like, I've been undercover so long, I don't even know what side I'm on anymore. It's like all the dialogue is very intentionally pulpy, cliche, Hollywood dialogue. But with the full-blown flavor of John Woo blowing the shit out of every set he builds, every action set piece is 22 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
This movie
is crazy.
The last 30 minutes of this movie is the most insane thing bonkers. The glass that it gets shattered, the explosion, and it's all practical.
Yeah.
The squibs, like they have a hospital full of patients being gunned down by triad terrorists who've taken them hostage. And at the end, they just blow an entire hospital up. Christopher Nolan wishes he could directed something like this.
This was crazy. And one thing that you mentioned about how they were writing the films, something that also helped me put everything in context is that I read that it was common in Hong Kong to write movies, to start shooting a film that wasn't finished, the script wasn't finished, and they were making things up as they were filming. That was
that's the Hollywood way now, Carlo. That's how we do it every day in Hollywood now.
That's always because knowing nothing of John Woo. I mean, I wasn't familiar with his Hong Kong filmography. I remember that when Mission Impossible 2 came out, reports were coming out of how the film was filmed and written, and how John Woo said, "I want to have Tom Cruise hanging on a mountain cliff. How are we gonna get there? We doesn't care. We're just gonna shoot it, and then we're figuring it out." And I thought that was so crazy. And the fact that the screenwriter of Mission Impossible 2 is the same screenwriter of Chinatown, two polar opposite films. It never made sense to me to do something that way. But I like I said, I found out that was sort of the way they did things in Hong Kong. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna, if that's how things were done, I'm gonna accept it as it is and just let the film wash over me, because again, like I said, it's crazy. It's bonkers, balls to the wall crazy.
Can I make a practical argument in favor of how they did it in Hong Kong, which goes against everything I've ever said on this podcast about
Go ahead.
how I hate modern movies are written around CGI set pieces. Here's the difference. A couple of differences. If you're making a movie in Hong Kong, number one, you got to pay a shit ton of money to the government, and you have to have government approval, especially in this era. You had to have government approval over everything that you did, everything. Number two, and this is highlighted in all of his movies, and anytime he's ever talked about it, they'd have to pay off the real triad who controlled the territories they were filming these movies in, less they get in hot water with the real triad. So they have to pay off local triad members to not be fucked with while they made movies about the triad. Okay. And in particular, the action set pieces. So, and also, these are all practical action set pieces, which means if you don't get it, you shoot it again, and if you don't get it, you have to set it up and you shoot it again. And when now we're in the territory of squibs and timed explosives, and you're blowing chunks out of walls and sugar glass and whatever else they're doing, and practical stunt sequences, and this goes beyond Woo, even to like Jackie Chan's earlier films, like the Super Cop and Police Story, and even the stuff that Michelle Yeoh worked on. When there's so much physicality, you need such a long lead time to be able to conceive of the stunts, conceive of the set pieces, then figure out if you can actually do them.
Yeah.
And then do them and get the coverage you need so they look good on film. So it seems crazy not to have the script, but that is the most labor intensive part of the movie. And if you might as well get a lead on all of that, and then you can figure out the story. And here's the other thing: if you get on set and you figure out that the triad's not going to let you film in that building you thought you could film at, and you got to go somewhere else, or the government pulls your permit or whatever, or if you figure out Michelle Yeoh can't actually flip off of that, we thought she could, she can't, because it actually turns out it's not stable, and she almost died doing it. Or Jackie Chan almost died when he shattered his wrist on real glass, and we thought it was sugar lesser. You're running all these unexpected, acts of God on these scenes. Then you have to completely change the setting, and if you had a script, you'd have to completely potentially rewrite the entire movie. So if you can get the action stuff in the can, then you can figure out your drama.
Yeah.
And when you're doing A Better Tomorrow, he doesn't need to do as much of that because it's just guys just firing guns. We're now at the point where this guy's blowing up hospitals and nurseries with babies while putting babies out the window,
hanging,
and having people climb down bed sheets with babies from the NICU. This shit is crazy. Yeah. If you better figure that out first, we'll figure out the story later.
But it works. Here, I think it works.
Yeah.
And just another thing that I wanted to add, because you mentioned you were talking about something about that when you began. But one of the things that I read that Wu wanted to do with this film is to turn the tables on what he was doing in his previous film, because his previous films people complain that you're glamorizing triads and you're glamorizing gangs, because that all the lead characters in all the previous films are former triad members or active hitman triad members, and in this one
killers, horrible killers.
The killer. in this one, the two main characters are police. One is an undercover cop, but they're both policemen, and he wanted to make a film to do the same for cops, glamorize cops and what they did. So I thought that was also.
He also said he wanted to make the least stylized film he had ever made. When he made this movie, he was like, I realized I was starting to be known for certain, like, my style, and maybe I'd gone too far in a few places.
Well,
and I wanted to really scale it back. And he said, and instead, I made probably my most stylized
here's the
violent movie to date.
Here's the thing.
Hilarious.
Well, you have that tea house shootout at the end, which is crazy. It's a crazy shootout where the casualties are, 30 people, 40 people, I don't know, because they're shooting at everybody. And it's crazy. And just one quick, because he has a talent for some visual, great visual shots and great visual imageries. And there's one shot in that tea house that really stuck with me. It doesn't make any sense, but it looked cool. And it's towards the end when Chow Yun-fat corners the bad guy, that he jumps from a table and the bad guy shoots like a flour bag or something, and leaves
Yes,
Xiao Yun-fat
yes.
covered in a white flour, but he has streaks of blood. He has streaks of blood
Yes.
after he shoots the bad guy, but it looks
Yes.
so cool. It doesn't make any sense, and this is
No.
a trope that John Woo shoots so many action scenes that doesn't make any sense. They don't make any sense. This wouldn't work in real life, but it looks cool, and that's all he cares. But it works. I mean, visually and stylistically, and in terms of an action set piece, it works. But anyway, after that, he dials down the plot as we meet Alan, Tony Long's character, and you think he's going for a more moral uh, angle to this film, as you have this undercover guy that, as you said, he doesn't know where he stands. Am I on the good side? Am I on the bad side? And
Shang-Chi's dad, by the way, if you're wondering who Tony Leung is, like, well, who's this guy?
Yeah.
He plays the Mandarin in the Shang-Chi.
And he's great. He owns this film. He's the best character. I mean,
Owns it. Super handsome,
Yeah.
super charismatic,
super cool,
Yep.
super handsome. Not showy and fat cool, because you
No,
get
different.
the emotion. He's more emotionally charged and conflicted, and you get that. But
Loves swans. He loves making his little swans.
origami swans, swan origami,
origami and flowers. He loves flowers.
Yeah. And songs, because he sends he was the songs that he sent to the police captain to sort of hint what But you think that they're going for this moral, subdued angle, but then as the film goes on, they start to things get more crazy and crazy, and then by the end, it doesn't matter if he's on the bad side or the good side. They're just shooting everybody. And that's if I'm gonna nitpick a bit, that's I maybe would have appreciated if it stuck more to that emotional, moral conflict on the character, but towards the end they don't care.
At some point they start injecting direct comedy. It starts real heavy.
I mean, the bit with the
and
baby,
then it just ends up being intentionally comedic. To the point where he's like freaking out because he's like, oh, like you just said, I don't even know if I think I killed a cop. Oh my God, I think I killed a cop. I don't know. Did I kill a bad guy or good guy? And Chow Yun-fat's like, you didn't kill a cop. Get it out of your head. And he's like, he's like, I didn't kill a cop. He's like, no, actually, you killed a cop. I just didn't want to tell you that.
That's the thing.
And it's played for comedy. I'm like, what the fuck?
That's precisely the scene that I was talking about, because at some point in this crazy shootout where you see it feels like Night of the Living Dead on drugs, where you have swarms of gang members entering this hospital and they're shooting at everybody. I don't know how they make sure they're not shooting people, because they're just shooting. I mean, at one point, the Chow Yun-fat and Tony Leung are in an elevator, and the elevator doors open, and they just shoot without looking. It looks cool, but they just shoot without looking. And then he shoots. They make a big deal of him shooting this cop accidentally, and I'm like, of course you're shooting a cop if you're not looking. You're shooting just randomly at anybody. So I just thought it was weird how they, we have this character with this moral conflict, but then in the end doesn't care, doesn't matter, just gonna shoot everybody as a whole hospital is exploding on top of them. But then you have that climatic scene where with Mad Dog, the main henchman, that they had this standoff with the hospital staff and the patients in the middle.
That didn't make any sense to me at all. This guy, we've seen this guy murder ruthlessly, women, children, everybody in between. But at the very end, he's like, nah, you don't need to kill the patients or whatever. And I'm like, why does this guy suddenly grow a moral? What is the guy with the patch over his eye and the evil villain Mad Dog with the patch over his eye? Why does he suddenly grow a conscience? Why?
I don't know.
Made no sense. I'll be honest with you. This movie is like a 5, 6, 7, maybe out of 10 story wise for me, and is a 9 or 9.5 action for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's
I've seen a ton of action movies. I have seen a ton of action movies. And I certainly in the last 20 years, I've seen a ton of action movies. This is whatever he did here is the blueprint for the next 20 years, next 30 years of action movies. And it's the blueprint we're still in today. If you've ever seen anything cool in an action movie, it comes from Hard Boiled. I don't know how else to put it. This is insane. If you released a movie today with this much practical stunt work and effects, with an action sequence like the last 30 minutes of this movie, people would shit their pants in a theater. People have not. I mean, and I like John Wick 4. I really liked it a lot. This blows most of John Wick 4 out of the water. Just this last 30 minutes. And you're just going, how the hell? Again, with heavy ass cameras. And how did they do in Hong Kong? How did they do this? It's amazing. It's incredible.
On a 4.5
so it's my number 3. Yeah, with such a small budget, with the triads really trying to fuck with you. It's insane. It's my number 3 for the week, 8.75 out of 10. It's skewed lower just because of the story is at a certain point, it starts real heavy, the moral, like you said, the moral conflict between these two guys. And he's just like, whatever. So we're just
let's blow shit up. No, but yeah, I agree. This again, we have here this romantic relationship. I just wanted to mention that again because you have again a strong brotherly relationship built and an unsuccessful. At one point, I figure, were they together? Are they boyfriend girlfriend or were they ex? Or
this is the worst one of all.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
No.
The film just doesn't care about that. But it's so crazy. It's chaos, but it's concerted chaos, so operatic, so fluid, flying, sliding down stairs, floors, whatever. That you just have to love it. And again, a beautiful mess. I have Hard Boiled at 3.5 out of 5. If I translate that, I'm going to put it at 7.5 out of 10. That's my number 2.
I can't believe that. Well, actually, I can believe it, and I'm in favor that you go. We got a 1 and a 2 because I thought where this was headed was our next film might be your number 1 or number 2, and I am so grateful, Carlo, that it isn't. Of course, I'm talking about the first film he made in America under Universal Studios, which is beloved by many. In 1993's Hard Target, which currently has a 60% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Critics are calling Hard Target 100% action, a rocket-powered roller coaster, a supercharged blast of fireworks. With breathtaking, amazing stunts.
How's it feel to be hunted? You tell me.
Legendary director John Woo is a movie magician, and Jean-Claude Van Damme is the #1 action hero in movies today.
He's obviously not someone we should underestimate.
Hard Target, rated R. Now playing at theaters everywhere.
It, of course, was directed by John Woo. It was written by Chuck Ferrer. This is the triumphant return of Arnold Vosloo from The Mummy Returns. I've been meaning to bring something back. I can't do it every time, but I'll do it this time for those old school listeners. Guard your ears, Carlo. It is the triumphant return of Lance Henriksen, last seen in Super Mario Brothers. It's the triumphant return of Wilford Brimley, last seen in The Thing. It is the triumphant return of Sven Thorson from Gladiator. It is the how did I used to do this? It's the triumphant return of Willie C. Carpenter, last seen in Men in Black, and it is the triumphant return of Jean-Claude Van Damme, last seen in Sudden Death, or if you're on Patreon, Cyborg, where I did a video watch along for Binge Movies Presents for our 2 top tiers on patreon.com/binge movies with fan favorite Lindsay Washburn. This is a triumphant, quote unquote, debut of Yancey Butler, who's the bastard daughter of Linda Hamilton and Yasmin Bleeth. Film was released August 20th, 1993, in a budget of $19.5 million. It made $74.2 million. Mullets experiencing homelessness are hunt down in the Big Easy.
Two guys on the wrong side of the law try to stop the greasy-haired drifter that's stopping them from playing their game.
Well, yeah, it's kind of an inversion, right? The hitmen are actually bad this time around.
Yeah.
And it's, there you go. A little bit of history of this movie. Sam Raimi was actually forced to be on set.
Babysit John Woo.
To babysit John Woo to calm the nerves of Universal, who had so little faith in his ability to direct a film. Why bring this man over from Hong Kong and give him $13 million and a multi-picture contract to make a movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme, who you have elevated out of the wreckage that was Canon Films, try to make a legitimate movie star out of him and go, now that we're here, I don't know that you can do this. Doesn't make any sense.
They say that Sam Raimi said, "You're paying me to watch John Woo film a movie? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to bring my brother too, and I'm going to give him a cameo."
Well, that's what I was going to say. Sam was involved in the movie because Ted Raimi appears at some point. Yeah. The other thing I wonder if the relationship between Raimi and Vosloo began here, because Vosloo would go on to play Darkman in the straight to VHS sequels of Darkman, including Die Darkman Die, which is one of the great all-time subtitles of a B movie. Darkman 2, Die Darkman Die. I've always loved that one. I do have a conspiracy for you, Carlo. I want to know if you think I'm right about this.
Should.
Whenever a hack screenwriter wants to write an action movie, they crib The Deadliest Game.
It's one of the most adapted short stories.
Oh, every half-ass action movie to this day, including the ones with a completely addled Bruce Willis, that they were exploiting him and putting him in these horrible movies for years without telling the public he had a freaking medical condition. They're all about the deadliest game is man, and you got to hunt men down, and rich people want to hunt the poor. And there's so many stories of wealthy people paying top dollar to hunt and kill the poor. It has to be happening, right? I don't want to go full-blown conspiracy theorist on you, Carlo, but there's an island somewhere where the rich people are hunting down the rest of us, right? They're letting us know that this is a real thing. Has to.
I know people, so I wouldn't put it past it. I wouldn't.
Well, I understand it's an obvious metaphor
People
for
suck,
income inequality, right? Yeah, the wealthy are killing us and they're killing the planet, and but I believe in my heart of hearts that somewhere the rich are killing for sport. That's all I'm going to say. The most effective scene in this movie is the Elijah Roper scene, and it's the scene where he actually manages to escape the game. Yeah. He turns the tables, he escapes the game, he kills the rich guy, and he ends up in the neon-soaked streets of a very wet nighttime New Orleans. And everybody in society, even though he's profusely bleeding and begging for help, all the other denizens of the night are like, "Get a job, bum."
No, I don't have any money.
Right. I suggest you do yourself a favor. Get a job, sir. And as he's bleeding out, and then he just resigns himself to being killed.
Yeah.
That is the closest thing to a theme or a thesis statement or a moral or a point that this movie has. I thought that was exceptionally. This guy is begging for somebody to help him. And let me go full woke for you, bro. This guy manages to escape a system that is meant to kill him. And he escapes it. And all he needs is the minimal assistance. And he is stigmatized by his class. So he has no other option but to resign himself to death. That is real heavy, very thoughtful for a movie that has Lance Henriksen shooting arrows at people and Wilford Brimley doing the worst Creole accent I have ever heard in my entire life. Whoever thought the Quaker Oats guy ought to be Creole ought to be strung up themselves and put into the Deadliest Game. Wilford Brimley riding a horse, talking like a backwoods Cajun, is incredible. insane. It's insane that it was ever filmed,
It-
and let alone in a John Woo movie. Can you imagine? John Woo is making his first American film. They cast goddamn Wilford Brimley to be an action hero as a Cajun. Oh,
I hadn't seen this film, and it's weird because I think that it might have to do with.
I've seen
it. It might have to do with maybe at this point I was already had too much Van Damme. I had seen Bloodsport, I had seen Kickboxer, I had seen Cyborg, I had seen Double Impact, Lionheart, you name it. Before this,
So you saw all of his B movies.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
so the ones before this one, I had probably seen most of them. So when this came up, I don't know why I didn't see it. Weirdly enough, I saw Surviving the Game, but I didn't see this one.
Yeah.
So
That's another one with Ice-T. Yes.
So I don't know. I don't know why. But we were talking earlier about the scope, ambitions versus expectations and whatnot. And I don't know if I'm gonna say it out loud. I had a lot of fun with this. I had a lot of fun with this film. I have no regrets about that. And I don't know if it's the fact that I'm walking. Okay, this is a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, so I'm not expecting a lot. And I don't know if it's okay. So this turned out not to suck. It was fun, and I'm gonna get into why I thought
That's
it was
your
fun.
take. That's a take you're gonna go with. Is that it didn't suck?
no. Again, it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. But I don't know if it has to do with that, with those expectations, because I mean, who walks into a Jean-Claude Van Damme film expecting, this is going to be deep and thoughtful, and I mean, your analysis is more thoughtful than I'm pretty sure the writers and put into the movie. I mean, you have Van Damme is, he is not a thespian, and he plays this greasy haired homeless veteran, and
Chance Boudreaux.
Chance Boudreaux. What is the name? Chance. My mom took one, and.
Yeah.
And he looks the part. He's brooding. He looks tough. But whenever you ask,
he looks good in a duster.
Yeah.
There's so many dusters in this movie. Of all the places on earth I would ever think a duster would be comfortable,
New Orleans.
It wouldn't be in the most humid place on earth, which is Louisiana. There's so many characters in the deep South wearing leather dusters. Can you imagine the stench that was coming off of
it's
those things?
all so he could make that move to just like swipe the duster off so he could show his leg. Because
yes,
here's my weapon. This leg.
Why does
my
Lance
weapon.
Henriksen wear a duster though? Because that guy could barely walk.
Oh, no,
why do so many of the villains have dusters?
I'm gonna get in Lance Henriksen in a while, but anyway, don't ask Van Damme to emote. At this point in his career, he can't. Actually, I really like what he's doing in some of his more recent films.
Yes,
I like where he's what he's doing within his limited abilities. I like what he's doing, but anyway, I digress. But Jancy Butler is awful. She's
horrible,
awful, terrible.
horrible.
So we have these two leads that they're not that good. We have Wilford Brimley, who has one of awful, but it's fun. It's a terrible supporting performance, which you described already, but it makes laugh. So don't spill it; it kills the grass.
Kenan Thompson being Pierre Escargot in a bathtub and all that had a more convincing accent that this guy is a Cajun. And if he had gone, ho, 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 mon ami, ho, ho, I'm from Nolens. That's what he's doing.
Terrible.
It's like, what the?
Terrible. Terrible.
Ho, 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 I had a tragedy. My whiskey don't spill. Ho. Yeah.
But Lance Henriksen and Arnold Vosloo are so much fun to watch. They're so good in this movie. I really love. I mean, just look at what Lance Henriksen is doing. I mean, the man's jacket caught on fire, and he just took it off as if it was nothing. I mean, that guy was crazy. I really enjoyed the, based on just Lance Henriksen and Arnold Vosloo. I loved it.
Did you love some of the dialogue, such as, and tell that bitch girlfriend of yours to point her titties north and then step on the gas? They don't ride them like they used to, do they, Carlo?
No, definitely. It's not a dialogue. Is shit. But again, I can't deny that I had a lot of fun with it. I'm sorry, but it's not maybe something that I can explain or wave or whatever. But I had fun with it.
At one point in this film, Jean-Claude Van Damme roundhouse kicks a man going 70 miles an hour on a dirt bike, which would shatter his tibia and fibula into 1 billion shards. Instead, Jean-Claude then surfs that dirt bike with a leaky gas tank into oncoming bad guy traffic while firing his pistol. He's surfing it. He's standing on top of the motorcycle. Nobody's steering but Jesus. And he's heading down an on-ramp into bad guy traffic. He leaps over the goon's truck, does a barrel roll off of the
shooting
roof.
the driver.
After shooting the driver, lands on hard pavement, somehow shoots under the truck or the van or whatever it was, hits the gas tank of the dirt bike in front of it, blowing it and the truck up.
Clearly, you haven't driven a motorcycle directly into oncoming traffic, right? While shooting the driver. Clearly, you haven't done it.
Yancey Butler has so many scenes of slow-mo, big-eyed reactions. Yeah. The most famous one is, of course, the one where she has a slow-mo, big-eyed reaction to a snake. And this stuff is the stuff of legend. Because Jean-Claude captures the snake, slaps it in its head as a guitar solo begins to shred. He then, after slapping it in the head, punches it in the face, and then bites off the rattler at the end. Then he repurposes the semi-concussed rattlesnake, now stripped of its rattle. He repurposes it as a trap somehow that is tied to a vine. So when a guy steps on a vine, the snake comes out of a tree and bites the guy's fucking face off.
Oh, you see what you did there?
Yeah. Face off. Oh, yes. Chance Boudreaux has a line which I loved. He goes, I can't do Van Damme. He's like, I've got people after me. Less emotion. I have people after me. And Uncle Duvet, a.k.a. Wilford Brimley, a.k.a. Quaker Oats, goes, I know, I can smell him. No movie, Carlo, this stupidly written, this badly acted, this over-stylized, and this expertly directed can be all bad. So while it is the worst of the week for me, and I've trashed it, and it is garbage, I still give it a 7.5 out of 10. Based on nothing more than the sheer number of slow-mo, freeze-frame, and pigeons that end up in this movie. And the fact that the bad guy dies at the end because the good guy puts a grenade in his pants and he's fishing through his genitals to try to get the grenade out.
He takes it off.
And he manages to do it, and it kills him anyway. Any movie that has the balls to put perpetually 85-year-old Wilford Brimley on a horse, extra point for me.
Again, there's no way to maybe justify me having it at my third. But I had so much fun. I definitely had so much fun watching this movie. One thing that I want to mention, just to go with some of the common themes and tropes and parallelisms. Did you get the parallelism with Face Off, the scene between Arnold Vosloo and Van Damme with their wall to wall?
Yes.
Yeah, such a great scene. That's a great scene. And I saw it, Face Off. And I think I even liked it more here. But anyway, I have no regrets. I enjoyed this one a
I
lot.
have no regrets.
Yeah, no regrets. I have it in number 3.
Do you think Lance Henriksen had regrets because has this underground business where he gets wealthy people to pay him money to hunt the homeless? I don't know why he has to. Why can't wealthy people source their own homeless? I don't understand. But anyway, do you think he had regrets because he decides the only gun he should carry throughout the entire duration of this film is a split action dueling pistol from the French Revolution? Why does this guy this wood grain? Well, it's like Jean-Claude Van Damme is literally under him, under a bridge on a train. He's like, well, he's more than 5 feet away from me, so I can't kill him. I can't shoot him. Get a gun. Get a different gun. This guy will only use like laser-sighted arrows and dueling pistols. What the fuck? Like, I just in a duster again. It's Louisiana in the summer. Take the duster off. Go buy a pair of jorts, Lance Henriksen.
You get the arrow POV shots.
Oh yes. No, some of those arrow POV shots were cool. But yeah, ultimately it's a POV shot. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And it's ultimately in the service of bringing down Yancey Butler's daddy.
Yeah.
And every time Jean-Claude Van Damme tries to say, I hope you'll find your daddy, it made me very uncomfortable. He says daddy. I know daddy is now euphemistic and means something different to the kids than it meant back in 1993 or whatever. But regardless of the current euphemism, Jean-Claude Van Damme says daddy in the most perverted way I've ever heard.
You know that the guy that played Yancey Butler's dad, that's the writer of the film. That's Chuck Farrer.
Well, then he got what he deserved. And if anything, it should have happened to him before he put the script out in the world. The only thing that saves this movie is John Woo, because everything else about it is garbage. And I think I think Lance Henriksen, who I'm usually in favor of, I think he's horrible in this. I don't buy his character at all. He's doing the same old, I'm the charismatic sociopath. I'm going to play classical music on my piano and crush your finger. I've seen this 1,000 times. His entire performance is, as Roger Ebert would say, an explosion at the cliche factory. I don't buy a single minute of Lance Henriksen. Arnold Vosloo can't decide whether or not he's South African, Australian, English, or American. His accent is so fucking muddled in this movie. He would later go on, of course, to play an Egyptian in brownface, and we never had a problem with it. And then he'd also go on to play Liam Neeson, and we never had a problem with that either. So, I don't know. His accent's the least problematic thing Arnold Vosloo's ever done on film. But still, this movie stinks, but John Woo is great, and it's so stupid. It is stupidity at its best, 7.5 out of 10. It's the worst of the week, though. And if you're saying bullet in the head is worse than this, you're taking crazy pills, Carlo.
I deserve a bullet in the head.
Metaphorically speaking.
Yeah,
metaphorically.
Yeah, please don't come for me. No, I have it in number 3. I don't care. 7.2.
All right, it's time for a recap. Coming in dead last for me is The Inane Hard Target, which I give a 7.5 out of 10. I think all of these movies are enjoyable in their own regard. I think 4 of them you should go out of your way to see, and this isn't one of them. Number 4 is A Better Tomorrow, which is probably the strongest story and best drama of all of these. I give an 8.5 out of 10. Hard Boiled, which is everything you've heard it was and more, give an 8.75 out of 10. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Probably the least engaging story, but definitely the best action. Number 2, honestly, my personal favorite for the week, with a 9.25 out of 10, is The Killer. And coming number 1, added to the short list, is Bullet in the Head, which I give a 9.5 out of 10.
At number 5, I have The Muddled Mass of Bullet in the Head with 5.5. At number 4, I have The Unpolished Beginnings of Hong Kong Cinema and John Woo in A Better Tomorrow with 6.5. And number 3, I have The Crazy Fun Hard Target with 7.2. Number 2, I have The Crazy Bonkers Action of Hard Boiled at 7.5. And at number 1, pretty far from the rest as far as I'm concerned, The Killer is just so good at 9.5. That is a true masterpiece out of all these 5 and one of the best action films I've seen.
Yeah. So this is where I usually say, what's your recommendation of the week? And it doesn't have to be your number one necessarily. For me, it's The Killer. That is, if you watch one John Woo movie, especially of his original Hong Kong run, it's The Killer. What do you think? Would you still stick with The Killer, or do you think that another one of these?
No, I'm going to go off the beaten path a bit. And the first one that I'm going to throw is 2002, The Hostage. And this is a weird short, because this is BMW at one point in the 2000s. BMW commissioned a series of short films to serve as glorified car ads. And they had, the weird thing is that they hired some established directors and actors. You get short films directed by Tony Scott. You get Wong Kar-wai. You get John Woo, John Frankenheimer, and you get actors like Gary Oldman, James Brown, Forrest Whitaker, Don Cheadle, and Clive Owen. Clive Owen is the central piece of these shorts. There are like 10 or 12 shorts. He plays a driver, a mysterious driver that is hired for different jobs. And in the John Woo directed one, he's dealing with a hostage situation. And there's so much tension in this 9-minute short, more tension than in most modern action films. And I really loved it. It's really great. The one that I'm going to recommend and that I want to go with, I saw John Woo's 1979 Last Hurrah for Chivalry. Have you seen this film?
I have not.
This is you can say this is a precursor of what John Woo would do in the 80s with the films that we're talking about crime and police, but it's set it's a period film, in a wuxia film with martial arts and swords and whatnot. But the thing is that it plays pretty much as an action film. Just replace guns with swords, and that's what you get.
Yeah.
And it's so good. I saw it. I finished it yesterday. I started the night before, but I had to stop, and I just finished it yesterday. And it's so good. It's probably would be my number 3 John Woo, after The Killer and after Face Off.
On our next episode, it is the return of Forgotten Films of the 1980s, Part 5. Which includes 1981's Excalibur, 1983's Blue Thunder, 1985's Certain Fury, 1985's Young Sherlock Holmes, and 1986's Thrashing. Carlo, I've taken you over the time that you said you would freely give me. I hope it wasn't a waste of your time.
Well, first of all, it doesn't matter that we got over the time limit. I know I was a hard target, so I'm okay with the time. But now people can find people can find the Movie Loot in every podcasting platform. We're Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you can find the Movie Loot. And people can talk to me on Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter. The podcast is at TMML2021, or they can just search the Movie Loot. And me personally at TIEF THIEF CGT. That's where they can talk to me. They can blast me for putting bullet in the head at the bottom, or they can blast me for putting hard target above it. Bring it.
Careful what you wish for, Carlo. Well, I really appreciate it. This is a fun conversation. This is your first time on the show, and
yeah.
I thought it was very fun. I threw you a big old curveball and said, hey, can you come on and talk for several hours about something that you're not as familiar with, instead of all the many things you are familiar with, like classic Hollywood? And you were up for the challenge. So I always appreciate that. I appreciate your time watching the movies and your time having this conversation. And as always, if you're listening to this and you're not already a supporter of the Movie Loot and Carlo, check out his stuff and go ahead and give it a support. If you like what he's doing, give him a 5-star review in all the places that matter. And if you haven't done it for us, we'd like you to do it for us as well. So VHS summer is going to roll on. We're going further into the VHS era, just as deep into the 80s as we possibly can. What movie will I think is the best? What will be added to the short list as we head towards basically the back end of another season? You can only find out if you tune in next week here at Binge Movies. Until next time, binge on.